YouTube! Grand Harrier here, and I've got a Banlist prediction slash wishlist video for you here today. As we move through the final days of the KC Cup, it's become obvious that, while a relatively decent and healthy meta, there are some outliers that should be addressed and some long-standing decks that should have their power levels reduced to encourage a general shakeup at the highest echelons of tournament play, while hopefully keeping them playable for the general ladder. Without further ado, let's begin. The elephant in the room, Blackluster Soldier, a massive success from the Chaos Archives pickup box. This deck has dominated and defined the current metagame since its release. Let's discuss some potential changes to break its stranglehold from its sole Tier 1 status. Proposal: skill change. Must send a card from hand back to deck if you add a ritual from deck to hand. Endymion to 3 and or Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning to 3. Now you may be asking why. Blackluster is the most dominant deck of the format due to its ability to play a small, easily accessible package of boss monsters that easily swarm the field, while retaining their normal summon for the versatile Endymion that can either deal with back row before committing to the push, or hand cycle for its back row package. By putting either Endymion or Envoy, perhaps even both, to 3, you remove the limit 3 back row that dominate the current metagame. The skill change would also help keep setting 3 from being so common. Next up, we have Odd Eyes. This deck has survived multiple ban lists, and while it is no longer the dominant force it once was, its time in the metagame should come to an end. Either removing the free level 4 that the skill provides, or further hitting the powerful pendulum magicians that give the deck such strength and versatility. You could either put Oath Dragon or Wisdom Eye to 3, which would conflict with the Dragon Pit Magician, or another consideration would be Noble Dragon Magician to 1. Noble Dragon Magician, when paired with Dragon Pit, is a free back row removal before committing to powerful board wipes such as Trishula Zero or Odd Eyes Raging Dragon, and can make it extremely oppressive for people and like you have no ability to stop it. Next up, we have Live Twin. While this is unlikely to happen, I propose putting one of the live twins, Leela or Kiss-a-Kill, or one of the evil twins, Kiss-a-Kill or Leela, to 3. They have an incredible turn 1 board that, facing down a Leela pop plus 3 live back row, can be difficult for many decks to play through. By removing the ability to play cards such as Ice Dragon's Prison and other limit 3s, the back row they do end on should be easier to manage and provide more counterplay opportunities. As I said, it's very unlikely for this to happen as the deck is so incredibly new, but it should be something that is on Konami's radar. Next up, we have Tenyi. Now, Tenyi started out incredibly powerful, but it has since settled into a relatively healthy spot within the meta. However, if they do feel like potentially hitting the deck, putting Vessel for the Dragon Cycle to 2 to reduce the consistency at seeing it is something that they could do. In addition, if and when they do want to hit the deck further, Mapura and Shithana, putting them to 3 to remove the ability to play limit 3 back row, which is going to be a theme of this video and the ban lists going forward, would be something that they could consider. Next up, Eternal Bond Yubel. Overall, the addition of cheap decks for players such as Blue Eyes and Neos Yubel are great for the game. The burn effects of Yubel and Neos Wiseman, however, should be brought in line with the other changes. If you do not know, they deal full damage of the monster that they destroy or battle. and this can make it incredibly difficult to deal with them. Additionally, Konami should consider making the Super Poly added to hand via the skill require a send from the hand back to the deck. The skill is already incredible value, often being able to use multiple times, either adding a Yubel, a Neos, or a Contact fusion to hand. It's just a little bit much. Next up, we have Alteredgeist. Now, Alteredgeist are in a really weird spot where the deck is fine, but they don't have a skill on the character whose deck it belongs to. My proposal is a skill change to personal spoofing. Currently, you have to have a Alteredgeist extra deck monster in the main monster zone, and even then you cannot trigger the skill the turn that you summoned it. So in many situations you can't even activate this skill until turn 5 or 7, and then can't even activate the personal spoofing set until an additional turn after that. Ghost Skill has absolutely no playable skills. It just doesn't make any sense. By making it so that personal spoofing could trigger with any Alteredgeist in the extra deck, extra monster zone, it will encourage easier activation, people to play this deck on the character from whom it belongs, without pushing the deck out of line of what it could already do. Next up, we have the Charmers. Now, Charmers are neat. It is a fun skill that encourages deck brewing. However, the requirement to run a reasonable deck package of the 4 Charmer bricks, the Quick Play Spirit Charmers, and the Trap should be more than enough cost. I propose that returning a card from hand to deck is not needed, especially when it is incredibly common for the continuous spell to be hit by MST or Cosmic Cyclone before you're even able to take advantage of it. I do not expect this change, especially so soon, but it is something that Konami could consider. Next up, we have Gandora. Gandora Orchest is a very solid deck, and it feels extremely resilient, but kind of in line with the overall power level of the current metagame. I do not necessarily expect them to hit it again. However, if they wanted to, they could consider putting Giga Ray's Gandora to 3. They could consider putting Orchestrated Return to 3. Or Dingirsu to 3. Basically, remove some of the consistency it actually see in the Orchest package and the ability to push through multiple disruptions too easily. Basically, reduce the overall power of Gandorchist. Next up, we have Infernoid. My proposal here is that Void Feast and Void Banishment should go to 3. The reason for this is that Infernoid power levels are in line with the current metagame, and the restriction should be eased to be playable once again. This is actually similar to what I think that they should do with Cybernetic Overflow and Cyberload Fusion. Currently, Cyber Dragon is essentially completely unplayable because of these changes, and when you compare it to the sort of things that players can already do in the current metagame with the set 3 decks such as Live Twin or Neos Yubel, or with Blackluster Soldier, by easing the restrictions on these cards and allowing them to be played again, I don't think it would be unreasonable. Next up, we have kind of a controversial one, I think, Dark Hole. I'm not sure this should actually be hit, but it might be on Konami's radar with how powerful of a blowout it can be. By putting it to 2 or 3, you either make it so that decks running the Limit 3 package can't run it if at 3, or just reduce the odds of seeing it in something like Trickstar at 2 would be something to consider. Next up, and perhaps one of the more controversial ones, Nightmare Phoenix and Nightmare Unicorn. These are powerful generic extra deck monsters that are in almost every single extra deck. And while I understand that is part of their purpose, it feels like they can lead to extremely one-sided games when paired with cards like Crackdown. So by putting them to 3, introducing more cards at that coveted Limit 3 slot, you could potentially stop situations where your opponent is crackdowning your boss monster and then linking it off into a Nightmare Phoenix or a Nightmare Unicorn and spinning and or destroying more of your stuff. Something to consider. Otherwise, overall, I think that the game is actually in a relatively decent spot, and that if some of these changes are addressed, it would actually just blow the metagame wide open to further brewing. Well, let me know what you think. Thank you.